So it looks like we've got some pretty enormous Blood Angels leaks, sad losses for plenty of units including Gabriel Seth and the Librarian Dreadnought, a much scarier Astorath the Grim with that Executioner's Axe getting a glow up, massive speed with every detachment being able to advance and charge, and the Primaris Death Company are going to be hitting harder than I expected. Let's talk through the highlights of the big changes in the book. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Blood Angels, and it seems that as per normal for Games Workshop, the codex has leaked. It often seems to happen a little bit more with these big boxes when they have the launch boxes, as I guess they have to ship them out physically all over the world just that bit earlier. As we know, it's launch week for the Blood Angels. This one's going to be the week that the big box comes out, the Blood Angels army set with a Death Company flavoured force, Astorath Lamarty's 20 Primaris Death Company, and a Brutalis Dreadnought that you can field as Death Company now. Pre-orders going live on the 24th of August and full release in Games Workshop stores on the 7th of September. As ever, if you were looking to pre-order the box, there are all the channel affiliate discount retailers links down in the video description. They can save a fair bit of money versus Games Workshop, somewhere between 10 to 20% depending on where you are in the world. Here are the pre-order times for where the box goes live. Probably worth being early if you certainly do want to pick up a set, as we know Games Workshop sometimes does underproduce them, though who knows if they will do so with any one box set. In any case, a big thank you to anyone using the links down in the video description. As well as saving money, it does help to support Auspex Tactics a little bit and allow making all these videos my full-time thing. Let's get into it properly though, and as is tradition, Codex Blood Angel seems to have leaked a few days before the NDA date. It does tend to happen more often with these big box releases, and it looks like now at least the vast majority of the Codex is out, images pretty widely shared across various discords and subreddits. I'll hopefully aim to do a full breakdown of the Codex and talk through all the elements as soon as possible. Though for this one I thought we'd talk through some of the very biggest changes out there, round up things like the added and removed datasheets, a whole bunch of the most important unit changes, and some of the most fun, interesting things about the detachments that we didn't know yet. Firstly, one thing that's always treated with a bit of apprehension whenever a new codex comes out is the list of units that are going to be gained and lost, particularly with the Firstborn phase out that's been happening with regular Space Marines over the past few editions. Basically each time a new book comes out, there's at least a reasonable chance that more Firstborn models will be sent the way of Legends. I think the majority of people knew the list of units that were going to be at risk with this update, basically anything that was Firstborn and didn't get a shiny new Primaris sculpt. There was at least a pretty reasonable chance it would be going to Legends. It does seem now that we have confirmed that the Furioso Dreadnought and the Librarian Dreadnought are going, as is Gabriel Seth, Brother Corbulo, Tycho and Tycho the Lost, and the Sanguinary Priest option with the jump pack. He's only an on-foot character now, as the new model doesn't have a jump pack option. Obviously not the best news there for anyone who owned those models. I feel like Tycho is kind of surprising that he survived this long, having been lore dead and without a model on sale for a really long time. The Furioso does feel like it's had its spiritual update in the Brutalis Dreadnought, which has a similar loadout but bigger. I'd say perhaps the saddest losses are Gabriel Seth of the Flesh Tearers with his great big chainsword, and the Blood Angels Librarian Dreadnought, which I quite enjoyed myself. I've got one of those and I did enjoy him winging around with Wings of Sanguinius. On top of that, we've got a sort of pseudo-loss of the Death Company Marines that are now basically going to be fielded as the 3 different Primaris units, basically intercessors or jump intercessors plus the upgrade sprue. It still looks like we've got the bolt rifle variant of the Death Company intercessors as a separate standalone datasheet. The Death Company Dreadnought is still fieldable, but it now has the Brutalis stat line. And it's basically just the Brutalis Dreadnought painted a different colour, though admittedly it does look all very savage in melee. Otherwise, we do have 3 datasheets gained, and 2 of them are keying off the new Blood Angels captain that you get in the Combat Patrol. You can field him as a different option to a regular captain, pretty much the same rules but with some updated war gear. And there's also the Death Company version of him as well to field on foot, and a Death Company captain in Jump Pack, which is essentially the Jump Captain with a different paint scheme. But kind of fun that you can have Death Company captains winging around and leading those units into battle now. It looks like the only survivor for the Firstborn is the Baal Predator, which I did feel was at risk as well. That now is the only Firstborn unit in the Codex for Blood Angels, and I must admit my hopes wouldn't be enormously high of it surviving the next Blood Angels update, whether it's 11th edition or the next Codex in 11th. As ever, I feel like this set of changes is going to be the least pleasing thing to everyone. Never nice to have a whole bunch of fun and flavourful units retired. and particularly ones that lots of Blood Angels players have in their collections. I must admit, I feel like for this whole range update, while they've done quite well with the characters in my opinion, I feel like at least one more bespoke actual unit with unique model sculpts would have been nice, probably a Death Company one, rather than going the Intercessors and Upgrade Sprues direction. Having got that bit of doom and gloom out of the way, to be honest, a lot of the rest of the codex does look really quite interesting in terms of fun, powerful and impactful rules. Pretty much all the units and detachments at least look kind of interesting and fun. For one other question that I had, I was wondering whether or not Black Rage would stay similar or not. It does appear that it's mainly going to be pretty much the same as it was before, a 6+ feel no pain. They need to have a chaplain within 12 inches of them, otherwise they can't fall back under OC 0 as they go a bit out of control. And the rule did take one small nerf, meaning that the reroll hit rolls that they get is now in melee only. For some reason it was both range and melee before, which did feel a little bit weird to me, given that they just got ridiculously accurate with their Inferno pistols and things. But to be honest, it isn't really the biggest loss in the world, I think, particularly given that you can't field entire squads of Inferno pistols anymore. Let's take a look at the first detachment, and it seems that the Index detachment in Sons of Sanguinius looks like, if anything, it's been improved, which is kind of surprising given that it's already one of the strongest attachments in 40k. Blood Angels are sitting pretty at one of the strongest armies in the game right now, and basically exclusively using this. As we've seen, it's been renamed the Liberator Assault Group, which is a bit of a weird one. It feels all very freedom, but it still looks pretty fun. The leaks confirm that it does keep the +2 strength and +1 attack on the charge as its base rule, so powerful for things like Assault Intercessors or Power Fist charging in, and Red Rampage still gives you a way to get both lethal hits and the Lance keyword as well. Though now a theme with several of the stratagems is that you have to choose one or the other of those, or if you want both benefits then you have to take Battle Shock as your units go berserk with Red Thirst. That is a nerf, but one that can definitely be worked with. You can still have Blood Angels units just be absolutely ridiculously savage when they charge into melee. Otherwise though, as well as the sort of reactive charge damage buff stratagem that we saw on Warhammer Community, the Liberator Assault Group has taken a leaf out of the Book of the Gladius, it would seem, as they've now got access to fall back and shoot, fall back and charge, advance and shoot, and advance and charge. There's two stratagems here. Relentless Assault is the fall back and shoot and charge one. Again, it's either one benefit or both if you take Battle Shock. Or Aggressive Onslaught is the advance and either shoot or charge, or both if you take Red Thirst and take Battle Shock automatically. I honestly feel like access to all of these is absolutely massive for the detachment. The advance and charge one is not something I was really expecting. It means that this detachment both has absolutely savage melee damage when it gets into combat and can have excessively long threat ranges as well. Moving 12 inches, advancing d6 and still charging 2d6. That's an average of around about 22 to 23 inch threat range, never mind any rerolls that you might add to that. Overall, this is an enormous practical strength boost for the detachment, and a detachment that was already pretty great anyway. Otherwise, for a couple of enhancements, the previous ones didn't tend to be taken all that much. It seems that 3 of the enhancements have actually been moved over to the Angelic Host, the movement and deep strike jump pack one, and in their place we have a few more damage dealers. Rage Fueled Warrior gives a once per battle boost to the melee weapons of getting sustained hits 3, which is all rather nice. It's not going to be huge given it's just on one battle round, but it does usually equate to around about a plus 60% damage boost on average. Quite swingy though, depending on whether or not you roll those 6s. Still seems handy enough if it's fairly cheap. The other one that we've got is Gift of Foresight. This one used to be quite a good one in 9th edition as well. Once per battle round, after you've made a hit, wound or saving throw, you get to treat the result as an unmodified 6. Generally speaking, that's perhaps most impactful when you're doing it with saving throws, as it's usually going to translate from having one Blood Angel slain to basically automatically having that model saved, which is quite a big deal. Certainly doesn't hurt with hits and wounds as well. Could be nice with certain things like either lethal hits or devastating wounds. Overall, I feel like the Sons of Sanguinius detachment actually looks stronger than it was before. Advance and charge and the fallback and charge and shoot things are both really big advantages to be able to flex into. Next up, a bunch of characters maybe got some sort of minor side grades, but Astorath in particular looks way scarier. I feel like Games Workshop did pick the right one to give some good buffs to. He was rarely taken versus some of the other characters like say Lamartes or the Sanguinor, and it seems that they decided to give him basically 3 different really quite big boosts. First up, his own personal melee damage got way better. He was previously 4 attacks at strength 6, now he's 6 attacks at strength 7 at AP 3 damage 2. I guess going up to a big 7 attacks at strength 9 in that Liberator Assault Force. On top of that, if you happen to have enemy characters around, he's got precision on all of those attacks as well. Really quite scary stuff. And he does have devastating wounds on all of them as well, just at base, so that could be good for chewing through invulnerable saves. Then finally we've got Massive Doom granting devastating wounds to his unit's melee on the charge, and now that happens every charge, not just once per game anymore. I feel like it had him just a little bit less overwhelming when his big melee boost was only once per game, as opposed to every turn like Lamarty's is, and that adds a lot more to his utility. I really wouldn't be too surprised if he costs a bit more as a result. The book lists him as 105 points, though as we know the Codex points aren't always reliable. We'll have to see if he goes up from his current 85 in the Minotaur and Field Manual. Next up, I feel like the Jump Primaris Death Company actually were a slightly pleasant surprise in terms of the amount of scary melee weapons that they can take. I'd honestly guessed that per 10 of them we might get something like 3 scary melee weapons, one for a sergeant sort of equivalent, and then maybe a couple of eviscerators, but it seems that they can get more. For some reason the rules for them give you 1 per 5 can take an eviscerator, the big heavy chainsword that's 2-handed from the upgrade sprue. This one's 3 attacks at weapon skill 4+, strength 7, AP 2 and damage 2, but gets sustained hits 1 for a few more hits. Then 1 per 5 of them can take the sort of sergeant wargear options, some sort of fancy pistol and a power fist most likely. And then finally 1 more model per unit is allowed to either take a power weapon or power fist. I'm not really too sure as to the rationale behind that in terms of the model kits. It's not like the new Blood Angel sprue comes with an extra power fist or anything, but broadly seems to be pretty good news to them in terms of actual general purpose threat and doing a bit different to the Jump Assault Intercessors. It means that per 5 models you can have 3 weapons with high strength, AP 2 and damage 2, and per 10 models you can have 5. It's still not quite the same as 4 power fist loadouts that you could give Death Company before, but hopefully should mean that they cost a bit less. It's not quite as restrictive as I thought it would be, with the vast majority of the squad having to take chainswords. For the on-foot version it's not quite as positive though, you only get 1 eviscerator per 5 and then 1 power fist or thunderhammer per unit, so admittedly they are a bit less scary. Per 5 models you'd have 2 scary melee weapons, and per 10 you'd have 3. Talking of Death Company, let's move on to that Lost Brethren detachment. In Games Workshop's last preview article, we saw that their detachment rule was a noble death in combat, reroll wound rolls of 1 for damaged units, and if they're below half strength as well, then you get to fully reroll wound rolls. Probably not the strongest rule, at least compared with the Liberator one. It seems that the units that get battle line are the Death Company Marines and the Death Company Marines with bolt rifles, so the on-foot version, not the jump packs. Maybe not too surprising there. For stratagems, they do have a few more fun ones. Glorious Sacrifice means that if they're slain on an objective, say to a shooting attack, then you can basically sticky the objective marker. It remains under your control until the opponent controls it at the start or end of any turn. Furious Onslaught gives you pile-in moves of D3 plus 3 inches or 6 inches if they're within range of a chaplain. Could be very nice for getting more models into the fray, or maybe doing some shenanigans tagging other units. You do need to be piling into an enemy unit though and ending up in engagement range. And then finally for 1 command point we've got Wrathful Rampage, advance and charge for Death Company, and if they're within 12 of a chaplain or below starting strength the unit can also shoot as well. Pretty crazy that literally every one of the 3 detachments gets advance and charge here, though this one's locked to Death Company of course. Overall I feel like combined with the other ones that we'd seen, it is a fair amount of okay support for Death Company. At first glance though I'm not 100% convinced that these stratagems are going to outweigh the ones from the Liberator detachment. Just to take a look at a couple of the enhancements from that as well, we've got one called Sanguinius's Grace, and all of these are Death Company models only, so I guess you'd usually be using them on the captains, either the jump ones or on foot. Once per battle, if the bearer's in engagement range of 3 or more models at the end of the fight phase, the bearer gets to fight 1 additional time. So basically provided you're fighting a slightly hoardy enemy infantry unit, then you basically get a double fight there. Pretty scary when that could be with 5 power fist attacks re-rolling the hit rolls. It is just a bit specific on target and the positioning against the enemy unit though, so it's not like you're going to be fighting twice against enemy vehicles or things most of the time. But still it potentially is pretty powerful and could be very nasty against enemy hordes. Otherwise, the Blood Shard gives you a 2+ chance to revive on death at the end of the phase. You get 3 wounds remaining and you set up outside of engagement range as per normal for those rules. I guess that could be nice enough with a captain that you're planning on playing aggressively if it's cheap enough. 1 last chance to jump into the fray and take down a few more enemies. Talking of those Death Company captains, there's both an on-foot and a jump version, and they can lead their respective Death Company units only. For their datasheets, they're fairly as you'd expect. The on foot one uses the war gear for the Blood Angels captain, and the jump one uses the war gear for the jump captain kit. As you'd expect, they get the standard Black Rage rules, so they get to reroll hit rolls, which would usually just be failed hits of 1, and they get a 6+ feel no pain. And as with Death Company, if they're not near chaplains, then they're OC 0 and can't fall back if they're not near a chaplain. The jump pack one makes his charges a bit more savage in combat, with sustained hits 1 on their melee weapons, and a Death Vision's damage on death special rule where you roll a dice when he's slain. On a 2 or 3 the enemy takes D3 mortal wounds, on a 4 or 5 they take 3, and on a 6+ they take D3 plus 3. And you get to add 2 to the roll if the attacking unit contains the enemy warlord as well, as no doubt the Death Company guy mistakes him for Horus and goes all in on the fighting. I feel like the rules are kind of fun, and I suppose he could be relevant for bearing Death Company enhancements as well. I do wonder whether or not he's going to be enough to sway people from taking the chaplains though. Both Astorath and Lamatis are pretty good now. And also even just the regular chaplain's got big advantages, plus 1 to wound is great, and of course he counteracts the bad stuff that comes with being Death Company. Speaking of other chaplains, here's just a few other quick-fire unit changes. The Sanguinor with his big shiny new model is unchanged. He just gains the Tacticus keyword weirdly enough. I must admit it is a bit of a weird idea, the big fancy Spectral Angel somehow becoming Primaris along the way. I feel like no datasheet changes is absolutely fine for him though. He was already being taken in loads of competitive lists, heroically intervening into melee to swing a massive combat with fights first, and then being a fast and threatening lone operative. Lamatis 2 is also basically unchanged, again no bad thing for him with his -1 damage and his lethal hits. He gains an Absolver bolt pistol and a couple of keywords. He was good before and still is now, and I still feel like the Jump Death Company are going to be worthy of him leading them. The Sanguinary Priest is fairly similar with Feel No Pain and extra AP on the melee weapons. Mephiston has Lone Operative and fights first, as we saw. His other special rule was changed to a chance to prevent enemies falling back if they fail a leadership test nearby. And finally the Death Company Dreadnought was one that I was interested in. Basically it is the rules for the Brutalis Dreadnought for the pretty much with Death Company things bolted on. With the Death Company rule, he gets to reroll hit rolls in melee and gets a 6+ feel no pain, which is just all around kind of terrifying, both tougher and scarier in combat. It replaces the Brutalis' mortal wound impact hits with a sort of surge move type thing. When it gets shot by anything, even if it doesn't take damage, you get to move d6 plus 2 inches directly towards the nearest enemy. So that could be an interesting way to get an engagement range. You can only do such a surge move once per turn though. Finally, we've got the other new stuff from the Angelic Host. As Games Workshop previewed earlier, they're essentially the Blood Angels jump pack only detachment with no rules that support things that aren't jump packs, though of course you can take other units. The core rule is upon Wings of Fire, allowing those jump pack units to jump on and off the board, much like Grey Knights, kind of good support for things like Inceptors. They're certainly handy enough for melee units as well, and things doing objectives. For stratagems, they get that powerful Descent of Angels one for a 3-inch deep strike, kind of godly for secondary objective type things, but in combination with that they've also got one called Martial Exemplars for 1 CP. A jump pack unit gets lethal hits and precision in the fight phase. 2 really quite nice boosts there. Lethal hits will help them out against anything that's they're wounding on a 5+ or worse, and precision melee is pretty big as well, potentially being able to just kill a character dead out of any one unit. Very nice to be able to flex into that. Otherwise, for 1 command point, there's Angel's Sacrifice. This one's been changed since its wording in Sons of Sanguinius, and it's one of those ones where it means that the enemy has to attack that unit and only that unit. Really quite powerful as a melee manipulation tool. Enemy models and engagement range of you must select the jump pack unit that's the target of this stratagem to attack in melee. So say for example, if you had a cheap squad of jump intercessors jump into combat with the enemy, you could make say a big demon primarch like Angron attack them and only them, even if you're charging and attacking them with your sanguinary guard as well, for example. This could be really quite big, and you could even combo it with things like heroic intervention if you had an extra command point. This one's really quite a nice one to have access to. As we've seen previously, they do have the option to advance and charge, absolutely tons of mobility things. Otherwise, Games Workshop previewed the Gleaming Pinions relic. That one gives you the reactive move if the enemy moves up within 9 inches of you. Otherwise, the other 3 are all ones that have been lifted from the old version of Sons of Sanguinius. Artisan of War for extra AP and a 2+ save. The Archangel Shard for melee weapons gaining anti-chaos 5+ and Lance. And finally, the Visage of Death was changed slightly. This one now triggers in the Battle Shock step of the enemy command phase, and each unit within engagement range must test Battle Shock besides vehicles and monsters. Previously I thought that this one was kind of lackluster. I guess occasionally it might deny some enemy victory points if you do have a protracted melee going on. It is reliant on the enemy actually failing that Battle Shock test to care too much though, which most of the time they're odds on not to. Overall, maybe not the best news for Angelic Host, given that these weren't really taken too commonly before, though I feel like that Gleaming Pinions one is probably the best of the bunch. Overall, a bit of a mixed bag of changes there. I feel like the unit changes, and particularly the removals, are probably the most painful bit. Kind of sad to see a whole load of cool characters go the way of Legends, and in particular the Librarian Dreadnought for me. For the rest of the detachments though, they do look like they've got some really interesting stuff. I feel like the Angelic Host detachment looks pretty fun with all the deep strike shenanigans that you can have going on, and I quite like a few of the datasheet improvements as well. Lone Operative Mephiston with Fights First is all very scary. Nice to see Astorath get significantly better, and I'm glad to see that the Jump Pack Death Company still are hitting with a pretty good contingent of melee weapons. They should still be a massive threat to most things in the game with detachment buffs. Let me know what you make of these initial impressions though. Hopefully once we have the full details, I'll be able to make a full codex review in the not too distant future. If everything does fall into place, hopefully that could be the next video. Finally, if you were looking to pick up that Blood Angels Battle Force box set, here are the pre-order times for the Friday night to Saturday morning. Midnight Eastern Time at Wargame Portal and Fenris Workshop over in North America. Both of those links down in the video description. 10 AM UK time for Element Games, 11 AM Central European time for Taschengeld in the EU and Germany, and midday Australian Eastern time for Gap Games. As always, a massive thank you to anyone buying through those. It does help to support the channel, and of course saves some all-important money versus buying from the main Warhammer web store. In any case, let me know your thoughts on the Codex leaks. Look forward to hearing all of them down in the comments, and feel free to point out any other interesting details that I've missed. Finally, if you've been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep all these coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.